Welcome to the Reactor Podcast. I'm Emilio, and today I'm joined by Dorothy, who is the person who went from making memes in high school to now being a managing partner at Protégé Ventures. Really glad to have you here today, Dorothy. Before we get into your kind of background and talk a bit about your origin story, could you give us a quick introduction to what Protégé Ventures actually is and a bit about what you do there?
Protégé Ventures is Southeast Asia's first and Singapore's only student-run venture fund. So what that means is we have real LPs who we fundraise from, who contribute to the investment fund. We have two funds of 300K and 500K each, and this money is dispersed into other student founders by students. I am managing partner of Protégé Ventures, at least for the current academic year. In total, I've been with Protégé for about 4 years now. As managing partner, it's taking care of what I term as the 3 pillars. So the first one would be our bread and butter, which is investments side of things. So finding student founders to invest in, doing our due diligence, dispersing that cash. And then our second pillar is education, where we train up student analysts to go from 0 to 1 through our entire Protégé Ventures education program. So that's where we have our own internal syllabus. You can come in with absolutely no knowledge at all. We put you on founder calls, show you how to do everything from due diligence to financial modeling to pitching your first company to the investment committee and hopefully then closing your first investment. So that's our education pillar, which is very closely tied to the investments pillar. And our last one is partnerships and community ecosystem building, which is the one that I really spent most of my time working on this year at least. This one is really bringing together the community. Protégé Ventures sits in the intersection of students, VCs, other student founders, founders in general, as well as institutions in Singapore. So we want to bring together all of these stakeholders. We believe that it's only through community building, which then solid founders from these institutions are able to develop and grow their startups. So we put together a ton of events, things such as venture capital office hours, where VCs come down pro bono to give these young founders advice that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get. So we really orchestrate all of such community events to bring together the entire ecosystem. But that's a bit of what I do.
That's amazing. So you've been with Protégé for 3 coming to 4 years now. So before all of that, I kind of want to go back to your origin story and learn a bit about how this led to you being the managing partner at PV. So the journey to get here is quite interesting because you study at the School of the Arts, which is Singapore's specialized arts university. And most people's paths into like venture capital don't usually start there. So my question is, what made you choose the School of the Arts over a more kind of regular secondary school?
You know what? Actually, contrary to popular belief, a lot of people from SOTA did end up in the entrepreneurship scene. I haven't found anyone else who ended up in VC just yet. But actually, these days, I found a lot of other alumni who ended up doing their own ventures as founders or just being ecosystem community builders in general. So I think that's something very interesting about the culture of being so open and creative that has actually led to entrepreneurial pathways. But for me, at least, I actually transferred into SOTA. So this is not something that a lot of people know. I was in regular, I won't say regular, but mainstream SAP school previously. So I really went from like below the knee length, poofy white skirts all the way to like a structure type of situation in a year. Transferred very spontaneously. I told my parents I wanted to do it, not actually for the art, but because I wanted to do the IB. After PSLE and after my first year in that regular SAP school, I felt that, hey, that's not the best cultural fit. And I didn't get along the best with my peers in a sense where I had a lot of creative ideas that I wanted to explore, but the culture was on the more conservative side such that I didn't have the freedom or resources to explore them. I was doing pretty well, actually. I was in the the school badminton team. I was competing for the next round. And then in the middle of all that, I was like, hey, what are IB schools in Singapore? Someone told me about the IB program and it was like, oh, what are some options that they have? Apparently, SOTA is one of the cheapest IB schools in Singapore. I don't know if you want to fact check me about that. But as a 13-year-old, I discovered that and I basically just wrote in to the school and said, hey, I'm not sure if you accept transfer application. applications. I know that the window just closed very recently, but yeah, let me know if it's possible. So as a 13-year-old, I sent in that cold email. I basically spammed their FAQ. The website to apply was my most frequently visited website for, I think, 4 months straight. Yeah, and then suddenly it opened. I sent in my application, which was honestly a portfolio I made in 3 days. I took a bunch of sketches. I really cut them out of worksheets and all that as evidence that I could draw. I put them together really piecewise in a sketchbook, and I just scanned pages and sent it in. Prior to me attending SOTA, I actually had 0 formal arts education altogether. But yeah, I applied. I got asked for an interview. It was a not easy interview for a 13-year-old. I had an interviewer who told me that he did not see potential in my art, which I think is an extremely brutal thing to
That
say
is
to a
brutal,
13-year-old.
Yeah, especially 13-year-old.
Crazy.
That
Yeah.
is kind of crazy.
But I was like, okay, you know what? Take me, don't take me. I'm doing great anyway. So by miracles and the grace of God, I got into the school. So yeah, but that was my journey into why I picked that. Yeah.
That's a really interesting journey. And I think a lot of people also struggle with having creative ideas that you really want to kind of explore and try, but the school not really giving any avenues to let you explore that, right? And one of these kind of creative ideas that you had was actually the meme page called Dhobi God Junior College. Am I right? Yeah. So how did that start? Can I learn a bit about the story and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, I have only after, I guess it's been almost 5 years already since that page started, where I've learned how to express this in a way that is a bit more politically correct. But the reasons for this is because it was honestly really problematic when it did happen. When I was 17, I committed this awful thing where I just had to skip a math class because I felt that my teacher wasn't helping me, and I went to the library instead to study math. Unfortunately, I had created enemies for myself because my work ethic as a child was extremely stubborn. And in one of my extracurriculars, I overstepped leadership, like the president of that student club. And I embarrassed this person in front of, I guess, 20 other people. So this person essentially had a vendetta against me. And when they found out that I skipped the class, reported me to the general office. Okay. So it was one of those really rare times where I had done something that I didn't tell anyone and I just disappeared. So I got into really, really deep trouble from this one episode. They called my parents in. They brought my conduct grade down. I lost all overseas trip opportunities. I lost all scholarship opportunities. Teachers refused to recommend me for anything at all. Principal, vice principal called me in with the discipline mistress, my form teacher, I think the math teacher involved. It was a whole thing. I was just like, wow, there's a whole council for this one situation. And I remember very distinctly the principal was just like, firstly, you tarnished the reputation of a scholar. Secondly, you lost the trust of the school. And lastly, you, I think, brought shame onto your family. I remember it was like very Mulan-esque. It was said in front of my parents. I am thankful that my mom immediately was just like, that's not very nice. And as a result, like, that was the beginning of it. I was then unhappy with the school. I will be very honest that I had a lot of eyes on me and for conduct for the rest of my 2 years in SOTA, which is very tough because you're doing the IB at the same time. You're doing like this major national examination, international examination that would determine the course of your life. At the same time, I have teachers coming up to me and saying that like, hey, your shirt is not tucked in properly. I'm just like, that's insane. So I grew this resentment for it, and I was like, if you can't change how you're going to see me, I'm going to change how people see you. And I'm going to do that through the beautiful power of social media. So I decided to just take a bunch of photos, content, posted it. We used, if you go all the way down in the page, we had things like starter packs. There was this meme in the past, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but where people put a bunch of items together, make them a collage and say like, oh, theater kid starter pack or something like that. And people would find it funny. We did bingos as well, where you see how many of that you have done, you share on your story, you tag friends. So that was really how we grew very rapidly. My friend Ashley, actually, she was the one who ran the page first, and then I joined her when I was like, hey, I have this burning passion to create content and memes about the school. So in fact, we managed to slip it under the radar for the longest time, which a lot of people don't believe, but the IB has this component called CAS, and we were able to get the equivalent of extracurricular points for
For the
the We Got
page?
Junior College. Yes, correct. So we managed to do it for like 4 months, which was the minimum for any extracurricular project. And then one of our juniors apparently went up to the person in charge of this extracurricular point system and being like, sure, like that also can. And that was how we got taken down. But then I was annoyed that we got taken down and made unofficial. So I said, you know what? If now I'm unofficial, you can't do anything to me if I monetize it. Because extracurriculars must be not for profit, right? But once it's not an extracurricular, I can do whatever I want with it. At this point, we had more than 1,000-ish followers with, I think, 70% engagement. In fact, most SOTA is a very young school. It's like slightly over 10 years old only. And most of the alumni body was all following us, including staff. So we had gained enough traction and engagement that I started to sell t-shirts and merchandise. So we started initially with our classic red We Got Junior College tee, and then we expanded to sweaters. We also have special edition t-shirts on top of every drop. So we try to keep it unique each time such that people want to get hold of this unique limited edition designs. And then we also had a few students come in and then do their designs, which then I commissioned. So we got to create a couple jobs, I guess, for people to grow their portfolio. During COVID, we ran fundraisers as well. We did like a little visual arts online exhibition. So we did honestly like an interesting amount of good, but also chaos with the page.
Yeah.
But that is the story of the We Got Junior College.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very interesting story. And I think that's something that a lot of schools also have, are just people who want to kind of represent the school in a funny way. I even have a story from my JC days when some of my friends created a page of just people, it was just pictures of people eating, and they'll be posted up. But after, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks and like 10 or 20 posts, we got taken down by the school as well. So I
my
think
God.
that's kind of representative of the culture, or at least the culture back then in maybe junior colleges and Singapore schools generally.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's really the thing, right? The entire time, even till this day, I am towing a very fine line of censorship. So we always emphasize we are unofficial. We're not actually affiliated with the institution. I actually put every post through like multiple rounds of vetting when we were still students, and we refused to sell the t-shirts to anyone who was not a graduating cohort, only up to very recently. So we did have quite strict guidelines on these things.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So after you went through a lot in SOTA, you had a lot of new experiences in SOTA. By the time you had graduated from SOTA, you were choosing a university to go to. You had already done some, I would say, like freelance work and built a project, which is Dhoby Ghaut Junior College. And then you went to NUS and you studied computing. Am I right? Most people coming out of SOTA usually, I may be wrong here as well, but would go more into the arts in terms of what they choose for their bachelor's. So what actually made you choose to kind of like broaden your skill set or go into something totally different in computing?
Yeah, I get this question a ton, and actually my cohort was very academic. So many doctors, my goodness, in my year. Most people actually went into non-arts related fields. But for me at least, as what you said, I had done already quite a lot of freelance work at the time. I was doing things like web design. My brother runs a music label called Parker Music, but at that time also he was with a lot of other artists who would require last minute album art commissions. So then I would join and just like help design it for like a little bit of pocket money. So I felt that I had reached this professional level of competency, or at least what I thought it was at when I was 18, and decided, hey, let me pick the most so-called valuable degree that I wouldn't otherwise be able to force myself to learn on Coursera or online. Something like that. And yeah, I picked computing. Specifically, I picked information systems. The difference between that and computer sciences, information systems, is leaning more to the product and management of tech side of things as compared to a heavy algorithmic thinking and the building of systems. So I think that's the difference. And actually, it was a good fit for me.
Yeah, so if any NUS students are listening right now, information systems actually just got recently renamed to business AI
Yes.
systems. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure the curriculum itself is largely unchanged. It's just the name. But yeah, just for your information. And yeah, that's very interesting because especially in computing, Singapore nowadays actually feels like a rat race, right? Especially with undergraduates in NUS, in SMU, all around Singapore. A few years ago, you were actually interviewed about the term Internmaxxing in Singapore. And from where you sit now, like in the past few years since that interview, do you feel that anything has changed in terms of the Internmaxxing culture in Singapore?
Oof, I don't think so. I only think it's even harder to get internships now, such that it's actually difficult to intern max. Yeah, to have someone stack internships back to back, it means you're not even done with the role yet and you're already looking for your next one, which what I'm noticing a lot of my juniors do. In my year, I think it was very difficult to build a career that you're passionate about. Ironically, because the market was doing actually a bit better, such that the promise of capital of being able to set yourself up for a 6K minimum job was very possible. Whereas these days, I will argue that it's getting a bit tighter. I mean, you have the sentiment of fresh grads should expect lower pay, should lower expectations, and then the workload is getting crazier. I have friends who can't even meet without 3 months of notice for a singular dinner once they enter their full-time jobs. So in fact, with the current state of things, I'm seeing increasing sentiment that, hey, if it's so difficult to have an iron rice bowl, if it's so difficult to achieve this goal of capital, you might as well just pursue your dreams. So I am seeing more and more people just engage in passion projects. In fact, I would argue that my brother, since he is a founder and is his own boss, he has more job security than most people.
In NUS, we also have a lot of opportunities for people to learn more about the startup ecosystem. One of those is our flagship program, NUS Overseas Colleges. You were a participant in the NUS Silicon Valley program, right? How was that experience and what did you learn there?
I actually chose NUS specifically for the NOC program. I was fortunate enough to be supported by Stephen Radi on the Young Entrepreneurship Scholarship, with actually Dhoby Ghaut JC as one of the reasons when from the day that I matriculated into NUS. And one of the very nice things that they promise you is you are guaranteed at least one of your top three NOC programs from the day that you get in. So my dream school was honestly Stanford at the time, and I wanted to have that experience, hence I chose Silicon Valley. I was in San Francisco working with Singtel Ventures, so the San Francisco or US-based arm of Singtel, and we invested in companies to support the main telco and its subsidiaries around Southeast Asia. Honestly, I don't really have anything bad to say about my experience at all. I think the fact that I was a corporate VC means that I still had some level of brand recognition. I wasn't just like any random tiny private VC. I think it's significantly harder to get founders convicted enough to let you invest in their round if they are that good. So we had that edge, and it was also very structured as compared to other private VC experiences that I've had. Just because, hey, Singtel does have they do have their own HR department. They have some semblance of an onboarding process, and the associate that I was working directly with was very kind to just, I wouldn't say handhold, but really support me from day one, as low level as going through an Excel spreadsheet, what cells to look at to identify anomalies in a company's data room. How to look at people's P&Ls, how to look at a waterfall model, for instance. So a lot of these things were extremely helpful to my learning and did eventually shape the systems thinking and also processes that I tried my best to implement when I went on to become managing partner at Protégé Ventures. But that was my experience with NOC in terms of my internship placement.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Yeah, so I'm sure you've spoken to like a lot of founders, or you had spoken to a lot of founders in San Francisco, and you've also spoken to a lot of founders in Singapore and Southeast Asia and the region. So the kind of common stereotype that you hear in Singapore is that people in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, they like move at 1,000 miles an hour. They are faster, they ship faster, and they are just generally a lot more excited about what they're building. So in your experience, do you think that this is accurate, or any thoughts about that?
I mean, it's true, a lot of it, because of the environment, the culture, the other people that you're building alongside. It's almost competitive to see how fast you can move and how efficient you can be, which is ironic because Singapore is so well known for its complex for
Yeah.
efficiency. But in reality, we are slowed down by a lot of proper systems that are in place for a reason, but sometimes can impede the rapid development of a startup's growth.
Can you tell me kind of your origin story of how you ended up at Protégé Ventures?
This one was also one of by chance type situations. Usually when people ask me how I ended up in VC, especially to have it as my first year summer internship, I think that was quite an accomplishment. I usually say that I tripped on a rock, but in reality, I didn't feel technically competent enough. Pivoting from art into computing to try to pursue a software engineering or heavily tech adjacent type of internship. By chance, I was over at a friend's house, childhood friend's house at the time. I was really in the bathroom and I looked up while I was sitting on the toilet, and I saw this little gold frame in the corner, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting. And so I stared at it for a bit, and I saw a logo at the bottom right-hand corner of that gold frame, and I decided to Google it all while I was still in the toilet. And I found it, and it said venture capital firm or something. I didn't really know what that was, but then I then Googled it and then realized that it had to do with investing in entrepreneurs. I was like, oh, entrepreneurship, I know this word. So then I went out of the bathroom. I went up to my friend's father and I said, hey, uncle, I realized that you work for this company and I saw the award. I'm actually looking for summer internships right now, so please feel free to let me know if you're hiring. And he said, okay, sure, send me your CV. And that was how I got my first VC internship. When I was there, I got to be one of the program organizers for this thing called Venture Capital Accelerator, which is VC Fundamentals 101 crash course. It's all held on a single Saturday, and we invite all kinds of students as well as just professionals in general who are interested to better understand what VC is all about. As an organizer of that course, I actually got to meet with the then managing partners of Protégé Ventures, who were Keith and Rahul. And they said, hey, if you're already actually in the VC space, why not you stay within the VC space even after you finish this internship? And PV might be a good way to keep your hand on the pulse of the ecosystem, even as a student. So I actually did not go through the usual application pool. In fact, it was too late. So they very kindly let me skip through one of the processes, send in my application, do an interview separately, and then they took me in. I was not the best PV analyst, actually. I don't think I was super engaged because of the nature of my coursework at NUS and a ton of other commitments that I was juggling at the time. But I would say it paid off in the fact that I ended up staying for as long as I did and stepped up as managing partner eventually. But that was how I got into PV. It was very serendipitous.
You pushed the female cohort from around the 20% range up to 42%, which is like the
Yeah.
highest it's been since the start. So a question I'm really curious about is, what do you think that was like the main thing that was keeping that number so low in the first place?
A big one is really just access and knowledge. I think having a majority male cohort from the conception of PV means that, yeah, they tend to have more guy friends, and therefore more guys know about it, and therefore more guys apply, and therefore more guys get accepted into it. I think it's very I wouldn't call this natural selections, but it's just the nature of the types of networks that people have access to, at least in the student body.
Yeah. And what if there were a few things, I'm sure you did many things to kind of increase that number, but if there were a few things that you could give kind of appreciation to, that were the main things that were the levers that could change that number, what would those be?
I came across this collective. I'm sure they have undergone a few rebrands now, but they were just starting up and they were targeting women, or like just women who are interested in venture capital, even with no prior experience. And I reached out. I saw the advertisement on the Telegram group chat, honestly, like past midnight. And I sent a message. I actually got an instant response. And I said, hey, if you're recruiting to start this student club, why not you merge your recruitment with mine? I make your event a lot bigger. I make your collective real by giving you a venue, a space, food, speakers, and you just help me a bit with the operations of it. You bring people, you use your channel, your Google interest form, and then get people to come down. And we turn that specific information session. So PV usually does 3 information sessions before leading up to the recruitment process. And for this information session specifically, we themed it on female-related VCs, or women in VC, women in tech types of themes. Yeah, so they came down. I think the fact that we managed to do that partnership was very effective in putting that on our brand.
So in terms of PV's kind of investment thesis or your mandate in general, you guys are student managers who invest in student founders, right? So in kind of like the VC space, some people may have the kind of thought that you don't want to touch student founders because it might be too early, or they may be too inexperienced, or maybe they don't have as much of a track record. So can I ask, in your experience, how do you feel about this kind of thought process, and why does PV bet on them anyway?
The goal of betting on student founders is to really think about maybe our big unicorns of today. Let's take, for example, Facebook. Zuckerberg started in his dorm room, and it was his friends who really did encourage him to keep going, even after the many controversies that honestly early Facebook had. And the goal is really to think about that model and say, hey, actually, what if my suite mate or my classmate is building something cool, but then they don't have sufficient encouragement, they don't have sufficient resource or support to be able to grow and scale that further. So, and then we bridge that gap when the average VC or angel, even an angel investor, might not believe in said founder first. I realize a lot of my friends like to sit me down during average lunch or dinner conversations and being like, hey, actually, I had this idea and I was thinking of maybe scaling it further or just to bounce off ideas with me. In fact, a lot of my friends back in SOTA used to do that with me, and I'm proud to say that some of them have actually ended up becoming founders as of today, 5 or 6 years on. Anyway, so it's to be able to find founders when they are still in their budding stages, based on their character, believe in them, and be able to fund them and support them in practical ways.
Yeah, and I mean that there are a lot of initiatives like hackathons and pitch competitions nowadays that are really trying to help
Yes.
kind of encourage and build up our young entrepreneurs here. Okay, last question before we wrap up. As someone who's graduating very, very soon, what is one piece of advice that you would give to an undergraduate student, or even maybe anyone even younger listening right now who kind of wants to build a career that is not only stable or well-paying, but also meaningful to them?
Maybe a bit controversial to what Singapore asks you to do, but it would be to make space and create free time. Something that I had an issue with throughout my entire undergrad journey, which I don't think I had until maybe my last year, was I had this chronic tendency to pack my schedule to the brim. I would say yes to everything and overestimate my own capacity, and I don't think that was good, because when I really said yes to everything very opportunistically, not only was I very exhausted, I was also very confused because I couldn't tell what I wanted to do. Yes, that level of exploration is good, maybe in your first or second year, but after a while, you start to realize, with enough reflection, which also only time can allow you to do, what are the things you are naturally good at and drawn to. I would say as like a 20-ish, early 20s year old, you're already able to have that idea of what you're good at and then start to follow these things. In fact, saying no to things and freeing up my schedule, freeing up my weekends completely. I usually don't put any plans on the weekends, and most of the time on Thursday or Friday, someone would then come up with a spontaneous message and say, hey, do you want to go out tonight? And then that's how my weekend gets filled, right? But it was only because I intentionally opened up time that then, and believe in abundance and not live in like this mindset of scarcity of, oh, this opportunity is going to leave me so soon, that then the things that were meant for me started to flow into my life. Yeah, so I think that's really the way.
I think that's really interesting, and I think it is actually really true. A lot of undergraduates in our society nowadays kind of wear the busyness as like a badge of honor, and like I'm so busy, I have no time in my schedule. But yeah, it is very important to have free time as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I will caveat that this mindset does come with a lot of privilege. That enough that my parents can support me, that if I want to take a break, if I don't have income for a while, I wouldn't like be unhoused. I wouldn't have immediate issues. But I think if you are able to and can afford having lower cost of living for at least a while, I think it's better to downsize and figure out what you really want. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. One last thing before we check out. If you are an undergraduate listening to this and you are curious about the venture capital space, Protégé Ventures analyst applications are open now. So you can click the link in the description. I'll probably put it somewhere there, and definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Amelia.
Okay.